Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
We expect the high school, cafeteria to be cliquish. We expect the MOPS group maybe to have tribes, but we want the church to be the safest place in the world. And the only way we can do that is by being individual churches. We are each the ecclesia, and saying, how is my temple becoming open and available to any woman in my life that might be looking for sacred sisterhood?
Hey friend, I'm really glad you're here. This is the AllMomDoes podcast. I am Julie Lyles-Carr, your fearless host. We're part of the Purposely Podcast Network, and we love to come alongside you for the life you're living and the marriage you're nurturing and those kids you're raising, all the things. And so thank you so much for being here and spending time with me today. I have a lot of stuff that comes across my desk, and I love it. I love seeing all the different projects people have going on, messages people are passionate about, incredible stories that people have when it comes to their lives. And I have a confession to make. When this one came across the desk, I was like, yes, please immediately sign me up. I have to have this person on the podcast. I am so excited to welcome who I really consider to be an amazing thought leader, social media engager, community person, and, of course, best-selling author too. I am so excited to welcome Natalie Runion to the podcast today. Natalie, thanks so much for being on.
Oh, hey, Julie, thanks for having me.
I apologize that we had a little bit of a tricky time getting connected. Sometimes that happens, but you were steadfast. You kept trying, and we finally got this thing to work. So thank you for your patience.
Oh, absolutely.
I first encountered you because I have a book called Raising an Original. You have a book called Raised to Stay. And so it's so funny when I have things that are on my Google alert or whatever, things that pop up that have to do with raising, raised, on and on and on. And when I first started seeing your work for that book and your messaging for that, I thought, oh, that is so compelling. I love that. And then I saw that you had a new project, and that was the one that also really lit me up because I thought, this is a conversation I want to have. But before we jump in, I want to give the listener a chance to get to know you a little bit better. I've already covered that you have all kinds of social media activity going on. You've got great books. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, your kids, living in Kentucky, all the stuff.
Yeah, so my husband and I are about to celebrate 19 years of marriage. We live in Kentucky with our two daughters, Annabelle, who is 16, and one, Selah, who's going to be almost 13. So I have two teenage daughter-ish
You are in it.
ages, and
Yeah.
we're in the thick of it and absolutely loving it. I've heard horror stories about raising teens, especially girls, and I got to tell you, they are normal teenage girls, but we're having a really good time. And so it has been really neat to be a teen mom and to work beside my husband in this whole area of ministry, of reconciling churches together to Jesus, to one another, really working with staff cultures and being plugged into a local church ourselves and serving when I'm in town. And so really that's my ministry that the Lord has given me, is to see a unified church through community, through really the blueprint of his word. And it's been really fun to go from being a pastor's kid to going into 20 years of full-time ministry, and then now being on this side of it where I get to meet all kinds of Christian leaders and pastors and be encouraged myself through those relationships.
I feel like we're entering a really unique time because there has been that season, and boy, did I participate in it, Natalie. I mean, hands up of, hey, we can market this church thing at this incredible level, and we can really tweak it and do this and grab eyes this way and get people in the door that way, and really thought that that would be all that would be necessary to bring people into transformation through a life with Christ. And now I'm seeing this move to this very intentional, hey, let's strip things back. Let's get really real about what faith means. And I see you very much at the forefront of that. When did you begin to realize within yourself, having long been around and watching all of this and being part of the local church and all of it, that you were seeing some things where you thought, man, I need to speak up. I need to say, hey, whoa, what are we doing?
Well, like you, I mean, I had been in the trenches with women's ministry. I had been in the trenches with worship ministry. And then also growing up in the church, I was watching friends of mine who had seen the same things I had seen, heard the same things I had heard. And they weren't just leaving the church, they were leaving their faith, and rapidly. And this was around 2019, 2020. We had COVID. And I found myself just heartbroken, just thinking, why are we losing so many, especially of the Gen X? Why are we losing so many Gen X Christians, and then watching Gen Z come up with this just hope for authenticity, for transparency? And I realized, wow, I don't know that we've been really doing anybody any good by just sugarcoating what's really happening in the church. All of the programs are not working anymore. We can't even gather in public at this point. And so that social media space became this area where I just started sharing what I was feeling conviction on in my own life, what I had wrestled with as a pastor's kid and ministry leader. And what was amazing was that so many people had so many shared experiences. And I feel like that online space became a safe haven for people to say, hey, guess what? Me too. And maybe we don't have to quit. Maybe we just need to work together to bring change.
I love that. We don't have to quit. We can bring change. I think that's so powerful. Well, as I was telling earlier to the listener, as I was alluding to, when I saw this project come across, I went, oh, because I resonate with this feeling. As the listener probably knows, for many years, I was in vocational women's ministry. And honestly, Natalie, was always a little bit confused that I found myself there. So I'll backtrack a bit. I was one of those kids in school that girls were kind of my nemesis. I mean, I got beat up at the bus stop, and I had some sweet friends, but I also found, particularly in those elementary school, early junior high years, that wow, I just got along better with guys. Like I have two brothers, I don't have sisters, and I mean I do now because I have amazing sisters-in-law, but at the time I didn't. And I really just was confused by girl world. But then once I got further into my adult life, I had amazing friends who were women, and they were so there for me, so incredible. And then I entered women's ministry and got reintroduced to, oh, there's a sector that operates a little differently than I do. The title of your newest book is I Don't Even Like Women and Other Lies That Get in the Way of Sacred Sisterhood. And what I think is compelling about the title is, honestly, Natalie, I know a lot of gals who are kind of like, do I even like my female friends? Do I even like what goes down? And yet at the same time, I find my female communities to be some of my most empowering, incredible, and encouraging. So talk to me about this dichotomy that I just have to believe is a felt need a lot of us have, which is both embracing and loving the women in our lives, finding such inspiration and courage and strength, and also at times finding ourselves being incredibly hurt and feeling like we're on the outskirts and feeling like we're being judged. What is all that? Why is all that in the pool?
Well, unlike the other two books that I wrote that were for the church, this topic seems to transcend beyond the church walls. It does seem to go into corporate America. It is just being a woman in general comes with very specific things that our brothers just don't have to deal with. And it goes all the way back to being kids and the things that we wore and the bullying for the way our hair looked and all of this outer appearance stuff. And then going into college and their sororities, and now we're getting into this tribalism of who has this and who's getting married and who's having babies, and you start to see these categories of women start forming the older you get, where now you're not just feeling like you're getting bullied at the bus stop. Now you just don't feel invited, you don't feel wanted, you all of those insecurities that were raising up in us as little girls, they kind of stay in us and become these lies that we begin to say about women, like, well, women are just mean, or women are just gossips, or women are so emotional. And what I was learning in conversations with women inside the church and outside of the church is that we carry these lies with us that a lot of times are based off of our own insecurities. So if we have friends around us who are constantly speaking life and declaring life over us, those are the friendships that we want to remain in. And we also want to speak life into those people. But then there are some of those friendships that remind us where we fall short. We don't have the big house. We don't have the perfect children. We don't have that job. We don't have the money. And so then that competition and that comparison creeps in. So I think we're constantly living in this tension of, I want friends, but am I willing to contend for it and what it's going to cost me to lay down my own insecurities and identity to encourage and love another sister?
Right. I saw so many snapshots of this dichotomy, of this tension, particularly during the time that I was in vocational ministry. And one that comes to mind is I was super hard over because I was someone who had experienced in elementary and junior high this sense of being on the outside. I never wanted someone who was coming to our women's events to ever feel there was something cliquish. Now, clique is a really tough one because the reality is we all have people we just resonate more organically with. And if we're not careful, it can make others feel like they're outside the circle. But I don't think it's wrong to have people who you simply are closer to. I mean, Jesus had the disciple that was his best buddy, which was John. I mean, we all have that, and that's okay. And yet, trying to maintain an environment that also feels really inclusive and where you're welcome. And I remember this one event, I had women specifically on my team that their job was to see someone who was kind of standing at the back of the room or someone who wasn't immediately finding a place to sit at the table, and for them to come alongside that woman and really bring her in. That was often very successful. But Natalie, I so clearly remember this one time, this gal that some of my best people who were great at bringing people in saw that she was standing alone, went to try to make contact with her, tried to make her feel invited at this event. I ended up, after I spoke, going out into the lobby and finding her out in the lobby crying. And I'm thinking, oh, she's going to feel so touched because she feels so included. And I went over and she was like, "This place is so cliquish and nobody's talking to me." And da, 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 da. And I was just floored because I'd seen people making the effort. It's such a great snapshot to me of some of the dynamics that we grapple with that you are addressing, the mythology that actually can be there, but then also sometimes the reality. I mean, it's just all in it. So, what kind of heart posture do we need to make adjustments to in the way that we look at women? I'm assuming that you've had times you felt rejected. I have too. Those have been real. But you're right. I do bring my own stuff to the table when it comes to that level of comparison and competition and all this stuff. So, what's the best heart posture for us to be in when it comes to developing healthy relationships and in how we look at our fellow sisters?
Well, it first starts with an inward examination to say, okay, where are the landmines in my life that I have not uncovered yet that make it difficult for me to trust other women? When I interview people about church hurt, a lot of church hurt is at the hands of women. And it's coming from pastors' wives, and it's coming from women's leaders, and it's coming from that cliquish feeling of, well, all of these people went to the same Christian school together, and I wasn't part of their college tribe, and so therefore I'm not part of their adult tribe. And like you said, there are going to be natural groups of people that we tend to gravitate towards, and that's not wrong until we become exclusive. And
Mm.
I think in the church that we have hidden a little bit in that, well, we all feel this way, and this is just part of being a woman. And so rather than extending those olive branches to people and saying, yeah, you may not be like my BFF, we may not all be from the same school or whatever, but when you're in my presence, I'm going to make sure that I prefer you over my comfort. And I always say that we expect the high school cafeteria to be cliquish. We expect the MOPS group maybe to have tribes, but we want the church to be the safest place in the world. And the only way we can do that is by being individual churches. We are each the ecclesia, and saying, how is my temple becoming open and available to any woman in my life that might be looking for sacred sisterhood? Am I closed off because of my own insecurities, my own fears of rejection, my own lack of time and capability to get together with someone? Or am I really just a mean girl who wants to feel popular and wants to only surround myself with the people that are liked because there's something inside of me that didn't get that in high school? And so there is this inward focus that we have to look at ourselves first and say, what makes me a safe place and what makes me an unsafe place? And then when I walk into a church environment, I'm not looking out for myself, I'm looking out for other people. Or when I'm in my work building, or when I'm with my kids and their parents, how am I making people feel so safe around me, not to be their best friend, but to just be a welcoming sanctuary for people to find rest?
What does extending that aura of being a safe person, what does that look like? I know a lot of us want and long for us to feel safe in the presence of someone. Sometimes we do have those people we feel safe with. It can be hard for us to put a finger on exactly what it is that they do that makes us feel safe. And yet we also want to exude that and extend that to others. What does that look like tactically, functionally? What does that mean?
It's actually like opposite of our human nature, because our human nature makes us want to feel validated. And really, when we are extending this, we are preferring other people to our preferences. And so, what does that mean? It means that if I'm sitting across from a friend or a woman I'm meeting for the first time, I dive into their story, not to get too personal too quick, but I am asking them all of the questions. I'm being a good listener. I'm intrigued by their story, not in a fake way, but in a way that makes them feel like I am here for you to feel the safest that you can feel in this moment. Whether I'm at the grocery store and I ask the clerk, "How was your day? It looks like you're having a wonderful day," or "You look a little bit sad. Like, is there something I can pray for you about?" Or a best friend and you are dying to tell her about your job promotion, but you know her husband just got laid off. And so preferring that situation to our own preferences in that moment takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes a lot of emotional IQ. And I think for a lot of us, we're just so starved to be heard and starved to be accepted and wanted that we forget that we are to serve one another. And really, that will tear down so many walls the minute that we say, "How are you doing today? Tell me what's going on in your life." And then hopefully it'll be reciprocated when that person is ready.
I find that because I'm in media, I'm a storyteller. This is where I fail, Natalie, because I have a really hard time with silences. So I encounter someone, I'm like, "Tell me about your story." And they're like, well, I was born, I went to high school, and I got married, and I live over here." And I go, "Let me tell you a story that's going to like connect us because I also have da da da." And I end up down this trail of telling a story that I really intend to be connective. And yet I'm also trying to resolve the discomfort I feel when somebody's quiet or doesn't give me a lot of detail. And so I really love that reminder too. Again, hey, Jules, zip, just let it be quiet. Ask a few more leading questions. It doesn't always have to be connected with a story. I really, really appreciate that. As I was getting ready for this interview, it made me think about a TikTok I just recently saw that I thought was quite fascinating. And I can resonate with this because I had it happen a couple times. A gal was taking video of herself bringing her new baby into church for the very first time. She's all dressed up, the baby's dressed up, and you hear over her shoulder a woman say, "Is she bringing that newborn baby into church? I can't believe she would bring that baby to church." And I thought, wow, I've had things like that happen myself. I think we don't understand the level of hurt, the level of just peeling off into another group or feeling rejected or feeling uninvited commentary like that can have. So, give those of us who are maybe of a generation where maybe we see moms making decisions we didn't make, or with young children, whatever. Can you give us a good holy, hey, keep your mouth shut and mind your biz? Can you just tell us what the impact of stuff like that is on a generation that's trying to re-engage in their faith communities?
Listen, words will either give life or they'll kill. We know this. And I always say some women just need to master the ministry of minding your own business, because we have this desire to control, to impart, to mother, if you will. And many of us didn't have good examples of moms. We had controlling moms. We didn't have a mom. Maybe we had an abusive mom. And so we have all of this baggage. We carry all of this with us. And so it's coming out in either the way we say things or the way we hear things. And so when we are introduced to a woman in a faith community, especially, who isn't forgiving, who isn't gracious, who is giving unsolicited advice, who is giving an opinion that was not asked for, it really can be triggering for a lot of women who are simply there looking for that relationship to be redeemed one way or another. And we hear things, even if you think people don't hear you when you make your little comments, or maybe you hope they do, it's more of a reflection on you than it is their parenting or that woman's what she's wearing, whatever that might be. And so just to remind women that if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And remember that your one comment could make or break whether a person comes back into church, knows Jesus, gets involved in community. And I don't want to wear that weight. I want to know that when women hear me speak over them, that I am only speaking life, unless I'm in a place of leadership where I have been given authority to correct and to encourage with biblical godly counsel. And we just need to walk that line a little better, I believe.
It is interesting to think about that. A lot of comments that I can think about in my past, particularly when it came to something in my mothering or something along those lines, I mean, just take that moment to remember when you had a newborn, when you had toddlers, how tired you were, what it took to get through the door with your kids, the effort that that involved. Because when harsh words land, not just land in general, but land on the heart of a woman who's tired, who's doing her best, who hasn't slept in however long, who is on the postpartum train, they stick. They stick in a way that is different. I'm amazed at how I cannot remember where my keys are. I don't really remember what so and so said last week about thus and such. But Natalie, some of the comments that I heard on occasion when my kids were little and I was in that state of just being depleted in so many ways, man, those are still in there. It is wild how deep they do go.
It's true, and even our own families do it. I mean, you can have the best sisters and the best sister-in-laws and the best mother-in-laws, and there's still a tendency to say, "Well, this is the way we did it," or "That's not how it is at my house," or "I can't believe you let them get by with that." And all it's doing is sort of reinforcing this "I'm better than you are," and creating that division and something that should be unified. And so even over the girls that come through my house, who are my daughter's friends, I am just like, "You are beautiful inside and out. I see the Lord in your life. I see the giftings that you have." Just reminding us that our words should be like honey, like sweet honey to people. I hated how people would look at me and say, "Oh, you're going to be so sorry you had two girls. Do you know how hard it is raising two girls?" And I rebuked that from day one and said, "No, my experiences will not be that it's hard and horrible and that my girls don't want Jesus and they don't want me." And I started to have to rewrite scripts that had been spoken over my kids and over me as a mom by people that were speaking death. And so, again, it's just a reminder that our words are so powerful and can carry generational repercussions if we don't get our hearts and minds in the right mind of Christ.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student, georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu. Now, in this whole world of trying to figure out truth and mythology about women, their relationships, the way they interact with one another, what's misogyny, what is just saying, hey, come on. I mean, we all know this is what's going on. You write about cattiness, women being catty. And that could be a powder keg of somebody going, oh, here's a trope about women. Talk to me about why you wanted to write about the cattiness that we sometimes see. Define it for me. Explain how you tried to walk into this with both truth, but also not falling into some of the tropes. Talk to me about that.
Well, talking about cattiness, I mean, this is where the term catfight comes in, right? Like women just at each other's throats, really nitpicky and critical. And when you think about the beginning of our entire existence, Satan went after women. Like the very first deception was asking the woman, did God actually say this? To make us question the truth that is God. And that has continued on into today. And so when we talk about women being catty, these are all things that women get in fights over, get divided by, and it's all lies. It's all personal things that Satan has made us question about our creativity, how we were made, how we were created. And it starts when we're young, and unfortunately doesn't really stop into adulthood because women continue to get caught up in these things that don't actually matter. And so what I'm saying when I say women are catty is I'm saying that women are focusing on things that are carnal, that are earthly. They're not focusing on things that are eternal. And that's just something that's been with us since the garden. And what we have to be able to do is say, it's true. We can be in our fallen selves catty, but our God is a redeemer. And when he redeems us from cattiness, he actually makes us super intentional and very close knit. And those details that were dividing us actually become unifying components that Satan knows that if we become unified, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And so cattiness is just this low hanging fruit. When we say women are so catty, we're saying a lot of things, but we're actually saying, I don't want to be hurt by a woman again. I don't want to be clawed at by a woman again. I don't want to be targeted by a woman again. And the only way we can redeem that is by being good friends to each other and reversing that lie and bringing it to truth.
Natalie, I am a big proponent of our spiritual communities being places of strong encouragement, of speaking life over one another, about letting some of the world's competition just fall to the wayside and focus more on the present in front of us and the eternity that we're heading to. And so I want to be in environments that are encouraging, loving, supportive. I do find that we have a dichotomy that happens for us because on occasion, it didn't happen all the time, but on occasion, there would be something that would go down. And as much as I do not like conflict, I would find myself needing to wade in from a leadership standpoint and say, seriously, you guys, we need to gut it out. I'd put a whole lot more frosting on it than that. What would sometimes come back that was interesting was, well, this is supposed to be a loving, encouraging, supportive environment. And now, blah, 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 blah. How do we hold space to have both life-giving, encouraging places and also hold enough tenderness that when we're approached about something, a behavior that's not helping, a community style or cliche that's happening that is not edifying, that is not building, that we can hear it and not hear it through our woundedness, not hear it from a position of I'm being rejected or I didn't do it perfect or whatever. How do we make that part of our faith community culture, both that encouragement, but the softness to course correct when things get a little weird?
In some ways, this is a challenge because churches have primarily been led by men. And when there are women in high levels of leadership, it's so rare that women are not used to being gently corrected or held accountable by other women. And when they retreat to being yelled at by their mom or being scolded by their grandmother or a nagging wife if you have to correct a man even. And so what I've learned is that women are much more likely to receive this kind of correction from a male leader than they are from a female leader. And that's unfortunate because if we were to look at the large church as a whole, there are more women in these churches than there are men a lot of times. And so when we don't have relationship with the women that we are doing life with, and something does come up that causes division within the church, and now we're holding each other accountable, which Matthew 18 lays out beautifully. Now we are the controlling women in leadership who are trying to put women in their place, not loving and caring spiritual mothers and aunts and grandmothers in the faith who are trying to course correct actions that could bring even more division to the church. And so one of the ways we can help this is, one, by getting more women in visible leadership roles in the church, not just putting them in kids ministry, not just putting them in women's ministry, but allowing women to have leadership roles that allow them to speak life into the women of the house. Also, relational equity. We can't correct people we don't know if we don't have permission. And so when we are a true community that's sharing life together, then we're more likely to receive correction when it's needed than to just get it unsolicited by someone who hasn't been in the trenches with us in life. And again, this takes time, intentionality, and a lot of women will say, I don't have time for that. Well, we will make time for what we value. And so if we value this in the church, we will make time for it.
And, I think something that looking back now, if I could talk to my younger self in some of those roles, there's a whole lot that I would not have let get as far as it did before I stepped in. That's something that I do notice sometimes in female relationships. I'm not saying it's exclusive only to female relationships, but I do think we have a tolerance and an avoidance that at times lets things get a lot further than they need to before we say something instead of saying up front, hey, that's just not how we're going to do it. That's just not the vibe we're going to have. And yet, oh, I was timid at times, I got to say, Natalie, because I just wanted everybody to be friends.
Well, we're terrified too because we've been hurt so badly by women when we've tried to gently give feedback. We're shot down. And so we are timid as female leaders to not look controlling, to not look like we're trying to compete or compare. And so I do think we overlook some things to avoid what we have learned is going to bring more pain upon ourselves.
You bring up in the book the story of Naomi and Ruth as an example of female relationship. And one of the things that stands out to me immediately, and I'm sure part of this has to do with my season of life, Natalie, but I know that we are very apt. I think it's appropriate to have things like a MOPS group or whatever, where people who are in your same season, who have an affinity with the season of life you're in, whether that's raising kids or, the retirees or the empty nesters or whatever the thing is. And yet we threw what actually seems, we wouldn't call it ageism, but it is. We are missing out on a fuller context of friendship because we just seem to be so locked into what our generation is. If we're all third graders, we're all third graders and we can be friends, but we can't be friends with the fifth graders. So speak to me about bringing up Naomi and Ruth. This is an example of female friendship with the understanding that they were of different generations.
It is what is missing most in the church right now. And as much as I love Gen Z and I see how much talent and wisdom that they have at such a young age, we cannot have a new church without the old church. And we are shelving our saints a lot more quickly than we used to. Part of that being that the boomer traditionalists haven't really wanted to pass the baton, and partially because Gen X has been completely skipped over for millennials and Gen Z. And now you've got Gen Z grabbing for batons that they're not ready to carry. Yet the posture needs to be, hey, your God is going to be my God, and where you go, I go. But we can't have that posture without having the generation ahead of us and behind us. And when I think about what I'm seeing right now, I see a lot of very talented young people who only want to lead young people because they're scared that they're not qualified enough to lead the older generation. And why are they scared? Because they're not being mentored and they're not being discipled because we're shelving the saints. And we need that Ruth and Naomi relationship. We need our Eunice and we need our Lois, as we hear about coming from Paul about Timothy. We need the older generation and the younger generation to remind one another of this kingdom work. And if we continue to just keep running beside people our own age, eventually this wisdom is going to run out. And so I just encourage every woman to disciple someone and to have a discipler, to mentor someone and to have a mentor, because that's how multi-generational ministry is going to continue in our churches. But if not, we will start to see a generation die out.
Right, right. It's such a good word because I am amazed at times. You are in your 40s, I'm in my 50s, how often I'm the oldest person in
Yes.
whatever the thing is. And I'm like, guys, this is not I'm still a baby too. So I am amazed that we don't often embrace the wisdom of the saints who are a few years ahead of us. So I appreciate that admonition. It's so important. Well, Natalie, we could talk on this, but I want to honor your time. I could keep going because I am so fascinated by this topic, but I want to let the listener know the book is called I Don't Even Like Women and Other Lies That Get in the Way of Sacred Sisterhood. Natalie, where can the listener go to find out more about all the great stuff you're doing on social, your other books, this one, all the stuff?
Well, you can follow along on Instagram and Facebook under Raised to Stay. And then the books are all at Amazon and Books A Million, ChristianBook.com, Walmart. You can find books wherever they're available. And I Don't Even Like Women comes out September 2nd.
All righty. Well, congratulations again. Such a compelling topic. I really appreciate your time and coming on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, listener, you know what to do. Head to the show notes, and a big thank you and round of applause to Rebecca, because she puts those together every week with all the links, all the stuff. So you can find all the great stuff that Natalie's been talking about right there in one convenient place. I also love it when you go to AllMomDoes.com, because I know you're going to find a community of women in all the stages and seasons that you're in. You're going to find sisterhood there. So head on over. It's both website and on Facebook, Instagram, all the things. So be sure and check it out. And please come see me over on Instagram, Julie Lyles Carr. I love when you pop into my DMs. Let me know about the topics that you're interested in, people you think we should have on the show, questions you have. It all helps us make sure that we're serving you and what is best for you and where you're living right now. And I'll see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.